I'm delighted to be back here in Arkansas for the 2015 Transformation Conference. I was here 2 years ago for my first conference when I spoke about my first book, Dancing on a Stamp. And today I'd like to talk to you about my second book, Dancing Forever with Spirit, which describes a series of astral adventures I had with my spirit guide, Albert. And before I begin, I'd like to ask the audience a question. How many here have ever had an out-of-body experience? Wow, that's more than I expected. That's wonderful. I'm in good company. But I can tell you that astral traveling is much more pleasant than flying on an airline. There are no security checkpoints, there's no cramped seating, and no safety concerns. And this was brought home to me on my flight down here yesterday. I flew on an airline I'd never heard of before, and I made the mistake of opening their in-flight magazine during the flight. And I became very nervous when I noticed their full-page ad indicated at the top they were inviting their customers to join their frequent near-miss program. And then it got worse. They went on to extol the virtues of their airline, and two of them caught my eye. The first one said, "Our staff has plenty of experience in counseling next of kin." And then the next one boldly stated that our planes are never hijacked because terrorists are afraid to fly with us. In any event, I did manage to get here safely. I don't think I'll take the same airline back again. And I'd like to talk to you today about my astral trips with my spirit guide, Albert. Let's make sure this works here. Got to push the right button. So with Albert as my spirit guide, I got to see many fascinating places. The first place he took me was to the spirit side that exists beyond the veil. And there I went to the Hall of Wisdom, where I had a meeting with the Council of Wise Ones. And then he took me to a water planet with intelligent cetaceans, and I got to visit a spacecraft orbiting Earth piloted by ET beings from another planet. And then he eventually took me to the new Earth in a higher dimension. But before I begin describing these in more detail, I'd like to tell you a bit about my early years and the first time that I met Albert. I was born and raised on the Great Plains of Canada in Saskatchewan. I was raised in a very religious Roman Catholic family. I served as an altar boy for many years, and I followed all the rules of the church very faithfully. The driving force behind my religion was my mother, who was a feisty Irish lady who was determined to ensure that her husband and 5 children all made it to heaven, even if she had to drag us, kicking and screaming. Anyway, after I finished high school, I somehow ended up in law school. And after I graduated, I moved to Calgary, where I spent the next 34 years practicing corporate law. But over the years, my religious upbringing lost a lot of its influence. And I started to doubt a lot of the beliefs of the church. And by the time I hit my mid-30s, I had rejected a lot of it. They didn't make sense to me. And so then I was in no man's land, casting about for a new paradigm to latch onto. And then one day, a fateful day for me in 2007, my life was transformed and all my questions were answered. All the eternal questions that I've been asking myself through the years, like who am I, why am I here, what is my life's purpose, and what happens to me when I die. So on this day, my questions were answered. It happened when I was still practicing law, and I was strolling down the street one sunny afternoon when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a homeless man jumped out in front of me. Now, he looked like a typical homeless man. He had long, stringy hair and a scraggly beard, and dirty slept-in clothes. But I didn't move around him because I was transfixed by the gaze from his sparkling, dazzling blue eyes. And that gaze was penetrating deeply within my soul, and at the same time sending me this amazing gush of pure, unconditional love that was infusing my whole body with an amazing sense of peace and security. Anyway, I stood there like a deer caught in the headlights, and finally he broke my reverie by saying to me, "Why are you here?" He then quickly disappeared into a nearby store. When I finally collected my wits, I went into the store to try to find him, but he is nowhere to be seen. So I went back out into the street and walked up and down hoping to spot him, but he had seemingly disappeared into thin air. So the very next day, I went back to the same street at the same time, hoping to find him. And after searching for 15 or 20 minutes, I finally spotted him sitting alone on a park bench. So I went up to him and I said, "Who are you, and why did you stop me the other day?" He said, "I'm a soul just like you. I'm here to help you on your journey and answer your questions." So then my skeptical lawyer brain kicked in, and I said, "Why do you think you can help me when you can't even help yourself? Because you look like you've been sleeping on the street for weeks, and you smell like a dead fish." Well, he just gave me a big smile and he said, "You know, looks can be deceiving." He said, "You look like you're a successful lawyer with everything under control, but we both know that's just a facade." Touché, Albert. He said, "You know, you can turn around and go back to your office and see if you can find your answers waiting for you among all those emails on your computer. Or you can sit down and have a chat with me." And so luckily my intuition kicked in, and it basically screamed at me that I really should sit down and talk with this guy. And so I did. I sat down beside him, and that began a dialogue that we had that went on for several months. He told me early on that his name was Albert, and that he was one of my spirit guides in disguise. He told me I was the only one who could see him in physical form, and after the first 3 occasions when I encountered him, he no longer showed up as the homeless man, but he was just a voice in my head, and we communicated by telepathy. So when I asked him why did he appear in front of me as the homeless man, he said it was his way of easing me into the conversation. Because had he just started talking to me as a voice in my head, I probably would have thought I was going crazy. So it was a good method of introducing me to to my spirit guide. He told me that he had chosen me to be one of his messengers, and that I was to write a book about what he revealed to me. And that ended up in my first book, Dancing on a Stamp. So during the course of our conversations, Albert revealed many truths to me about many amazing things, a lot of which flew in the face of what Christian holy men had been preaching for centuries. He said that we are all eternal souls who will live forever, that we incarnated on earth by our own choice because we wanted to learn and experience things that were necessary for our evolution as souls. And before we incarnated, we all prepared life plans. And in those life plans, we set out the significant aspects of our proposed new lives. Things like the place of our birth, the first language we would learn, and the identity of our parents and siblings, friends, and other relatives. And we incarnated here because we had very specific needs in terms of our growth as a soul. But because after we're born, we don't remember what's in our life plan, and because we have free will to take actions, our lives are not predetermined, and we will often stray off course. But contrary to what most religions preach, he said God or the source does not manipulate events on our planet, and the source does not make rules for us to follow. There is no judgment or punishment after death, because there is no hell. And no matter what we do during our lives, we will always return to the spirit side where we came from originally. So as I mentioned, after my first encounters with Albert, I wrote my first book, Dancing on a Stamp. Now I can tell you, writing was a very new and interesting challenge for me, because I'd been a lawyer all my life. And I'd have to agree with the sentiments of Gene Fowler, who said, "Writing is easy. All you do is stare at a blank sheet of paper until drops of blood form on your forehead." Anyway, once I'd finished the manuscript for my first book, I then struggled with the idea of having it published, because I feared adverse reactions from my family, friends, and my former law colleagues and clients. Because what was in my book was very much out of character for how they knew me as a lawyer. So I agonized for a while, and then finally I decided, as my friend Sherry Cortland put it, to come out of the spiritual closet and have my book published. Thank you. And so I did lose a few friends along the way, but I gained many more new friends. And so overall, it's been a very positive effect for me. And since I published my first book, many people have asked me about what Albert was really like. Well, I can tell you that he doesn't have wings sprouting from his shoulders, and he doesn't have a halo over his head. In fact, he looks very much like an ordinary homeless man. And while he was always wise and compassionate, sometimes he was flippant and cheeky and a bit of a rascal. He liked to poke fun at my many human foibles, and he often liked to tease me by telling me lawyer jokes. His favorite story, I got to tell you his favorite story. It was about the day that St. Peter and the devil were arguing about the exact placement for the boundary line between heaven and hell. So they argued for several hours without reaching any agreement. And finally, St. Peter threw up his hands in exasperation and threatened to sue the devil. Well, the devil gave him a big smile and said, "Oh yeah? And where are you going to find a lawyer?" But for the most part, he was very serious about helping humans on their human journeys to be more fulfilled and get the most out of their lives on earth. So then my second book, Dancing Forever with Spirit, describes my second set of encounters with Albert, which were really quite different from the first set. So I'd gone for a period of a few months without hearing from Albert, and I feared that maybe he wasn't going to come back. And then one night I woke up and I saw this ghost-like, ethereal figure standing in the doorway of my bedroom. And when it moved closer to me, I could see it's my old friend Albert, except he was in astral form. So I was surprised to see him, and I said, "Hi Albert, what brings you here this time?" Well, he said, "I'm here to take you on a series of astral adventures to the spirit side to see the wonders of the universe so you could write about them in your book." Because he said, "A picture is worth 1,000 words." So I didn't know what to expect, and I said, "Okay, Albert, do I have to tell my wife where I'm going? And do I need a passport?" And he said, "No," he said, "you'll be back in your body before the morning, and your wife will never know you've been gone." And so then he literally reached out and pulled my astral body out of my physical body, which was still behind, sound asleep in my bed. And so then he led me up. We floated up through the ceiling, up through the clouds, and we ended up at a high spot above our beautiful planet. And he let me turn around and look at Earth. And it was a breathtaking scene, because from that perspective, our planet looked like a jeweled pendant floating in the inky blackness of space. It was really quite an amazing sight. But he didn't let me linger very long, and soon he tugged on my sleeve and he led me through a shimmering doorway to the spirit side. On the other side of the doorway, I found myself standing in a beautiful meadow. It was filled with lush green grass, tall, majestic trees, and wildflowers resplendent in 1,000 different colors. So he led me down the path through this meadow. We went up a low hill, and at the top, I noticed a group of souls standing on the other side, at the bottom. And then my heart skipped a beat when I recognized who was in this crowd. It was my mother, and my father, and my brother, my grandparents, and various aunts and uncles who had already passed over from the earth plane. And then, to my delight, running around from behind the group was my little dog, Oscar, who had passed away 10 years before, and he ran towards me with his little tail wagging his whole body. I was a little apprehensive initially about meeting my mother, because on earth she had very strong religious convictions, and I was not kind to the Catholic Church in my first book. So I didn't know what to expect. But she wrapped her arms around me in a big hug and said, "Everything's okay." She said if she were still living on earth, she would not have liked what I wrote about the church in my book. But now that she was on the spirit side, she could see the whole picture. She said everything was just fine. So what a relief. So warm hugs all around to my family. Albert tugged at my sleeve again and said, "Come on, we have other things to see." So he led me away to a beautiful white city gleaming in the distance, a place that he called Aglaia. So we entered the city through its main portal, and we strolled down the main boulevard. And I noticed hundreds of souls swarming the streets, and they were all wearing very different, colorful garments from many different eras and countries on Earth. And I felt like I'd been dropped in the middle of a costume ball. And Albert explained that souls on the spirit side can choose to display themselves in whatever way they desire. And he said many souls will often wear garments that they enjoyed wearing from one of their previous lifetimes on Earth. And then, of course, they can change their appearance anytime they want. They can appear as males for a while and then females, whatever they want. And if they get tired of appearing as humans, they can appear as globes of light. So it was really quite an amazing scene. So then Albert led me towards a majestic white building with gleaming pillars in the front, a place he called the Hall of Wisdom. And there we entered the building and went into this large circular chamber with a high domed ceiling. And in the middle of the room was a table in the shape of a horseshoe with 11 souls seated around it. They all had snow white hair, smooth, unblemished skin, and they wore gold robes with white sashes. And Albert explained that this was the Council of Wise Ones, which was a group of very wise and advanced souls whose job it was to oversee all the incarnations on Earth. So the chair of this council, whose name was Sophia, welcomed me and said that they'd asked Albert to bring me to this meeting because they had a message for me to take back to all humanity. And so their message was, pretty sort of startling and very much of a call to action for humans. She said that our civilization was at a very crucial point in its development, that we had developed very advanced technology, but our emotional and spiritual intelligence had not kept pace. And as a result, we let our negative emotions control too much of what happens on our planet. Negative emotions like fear and anger and hate and greed. And that often led to a lot of conflict. And she said that they were very concerned that humans could take the next step up the spiritual ladder before we destroyed ourselves like some of the other advanced civilizations on our planet in its history, like Atlantis and Lemuria. She said that we had developed weapons of mass destruction that could wipe out all life on our planet. And we need to be very careful and work very hard to avoid that so we could raise our vibrations and take the step up the ladder to Earth in a higher dimension, also known as the New Earth. So in order to get there, we have to strive to discard our negative emotions and fully embrace love and compassion for each other, for our planet, and for the other creatures on it. And if we can do this, our vibrations will raise, and eventually the ultimate goal is for all of us to ascend to the new earth. So she said that they had asked Albert to bring me before them because they wanted me to be one of their messengers, so that when Albert took me on these various astral trips, I could write about them in my book. So, next stop, Albert took me out of the White City and out of the spirit side, and we traveled to this beautiful water planet called Proteus. It looked much like Earth, except it had no land masses. Its surface was entirely covered by oceans. So we dropped down through the clouds and submerged under the clear blue waters, where the plants and sea life reminded me of the life under the oceans of Earth. Albert led me towards a large coral reef, where we met up with two creatures that looked very much like a dolphin and a humpback whale. These creatures tell me that life on Earth looks very much like life on Proteus, because most of the sea life on Earth was seeded from life on Proteus a long time ago. They tell me that they keep in telepathic contact with the whales and dolphins on Earth, and they don't like what they hear. They ask me to implore my fellow humans to stop abusing the dolphins and whales on Earth, because they are tired of being hunted and trapped by humans. He said that their kin on Earth are very sensitive, highly intelligent creatures who can't understand why humans continue to abuse them without justification. They are creatures who want to live in harmony with their planet and with everybody else on it, but they seem to have a problem in dealing with humans. So I told them I would take their message back to my fellow humans, and we left Proteus. So then Albert scooted me back to Earth, and he wasn't done with me. He wanted to show me what else is happening on our planet. Our next stop was over the Pacific Ocean near Indonesia, and I got to witness the operations of a shark finning boat. I watched as dozens of sharks were reeled on board. They had their fins cut off with long knives, and then they were tossed overboard while still alive, where they would be eaten by predators or die a slow death from suffocation. And Albert explained there was only one reason for this abuse: to allow some people to enjoy shark fin soup, which is a delicacy in many countries. So then he took me to Zimbabwe, and I watched as I saw a herd of elephants, dead elephants strewn over the terrain, killed by poachers with cyanide poison. And I watched as the poachers sawed off their ivory with chainsaws, tossed it in the back of their trucks. And I knew that there was only one reason for this abuse. And it was horrific to see these majestic creatures die in that fashion and be abused. And there's only one reason for it. It's to fuel the illegal trade of ivory that is often made into fancy trinkets for people who don't know or don't care how it was obtained. And then to top it off, Albert said, "You know what? Your civilization stands out among a lot of other civilizations in our galaxy because you not only abuse your planet and its other creatures, but you manage to abuse one another through violence and neglect." He said, "Not only do we kill each other through wars and other violent conflicts, but we allow some of our people to enjoy excessive consumption while many others die from starvation and disease." Albert said it was clear to him that our race was a triple threat, but in a very negative sense. And so then he took me to a factory town over the south of China. And there, the sky was blackened and the air was choked by the smoke coming from the smokestacks. And he said this was just one small example of the abuse that we heap on our mother planet every day by polluting her rivers and oceans, her atmosphere, and her soil. So by this time, things looked very grim indeed. And so I said, can you do anything to cheer me up, Albert? He said, a lot of what we perceive in our world is due to the emphasis that the news places on negative news. He says that there are thousands, if not millions, of kind and compassionate deeds done every day on our planet, but they go mostly unnoticed because they never get reported. He said that humans have made a lot of progress in the last few years in terms of increasing their spiritual awareness and curtailing pollution and animal abuse, but we still have a long way to go. He told me that in the 70s, I would not have written my books, and if I had, no one would have read them. But today, there are so many more spiritually aware people that the books I've written and many other books that are in publication are of interest to more and more people every day. He expressed confidence that we would be able to manage our affairs and take the next step up the spiritual ladder to avoid disaster, because he said we were getting a lot of help from our ET friends and the good spirits on the spirit side. The ultimate goal, he said, is for us to ascend to the new earth. So then, to prove to me that there really is light at the end of the tunnel, Albert took me to visit our planet in a higher dimension, what some people call the new earth. There I visited a civilization that was descended from a civilization that originally lived on our old earth in Central America. And eons ago, they had managed to orchestrate a mass ascension to the new earth in order to escape from a barbarian army that was encroaching on their territory. Now, these people live in a wonderful world. Their world is free from crime and violence and negative emotions. They live in harmony with their planet and with the other animals. They don't eat animal flesh, and they eat only liquid food made from plants. And they've learned how to shield their bodies from disease and to repair injured tissue. And so they live they've learned how to slow down the aging process as well, so they all live for several hundred years. It's truly an idyllic world where they're free to pursue wisdom and knowledge and enjoy the peaceful splendor of their planet. It is truly a place that we should all aspire to reach. Well, the New Earth was a wonderful place indeed, but I asked Albert if he really thought that humans would be able to make the ascension. And Albert said, yeah, it's very doable because we're getting a lot of help from friends in high places. So the next stop was to a planet called Xeron, near the center of our galaxy. It was a planet where the surface was devoid of vegetation because it had all been burned off a long time ago when their star became a red giant. It was home to a race of very intelligent, spider-like creatures who lived in underground cities. Their job was to monitor all the planets in the galaxy to determine which ones were capable of harboring life. He said that eons ago they had determined that our planet was capable of harboring life, and they reported that to the Galactic Council, who then arranged for other ET races to transport life from other planets to our planet. And he explained that the Galactic Council was the body that was responsible for overseeing the seeding of life throughout our galaxy. He explained that the seeding of life on Earth began a long, long time ago, and it started with very simple organisms, and eventually they introduced more complex creatures, including humans. Well, I said goodbye to these people, and I felt grateful that these very benevolent, intelligent creatures were cheering us on, hoping that their life experiment on Earth would work out. And to further demonstrate that we have friends in high places, Albert then took me inside a spacecraft orbiting our planet. And there I met with some gray humanoid beings from the planet Nibiru. And they told me that their race, along with several other very intelligent races, had been involved in the seeding and monitoring of life on our planet since the very beginning of time. And they had also helped us along the way by providing inspiration and technical know-how to help us make technological advances that helped us better our society. And they said they would continue to do so as long as they could. But they told me that they were not allowed to use their superior technology to destroy our weapons and stop the violence on our planet. And so they've had to stand by over the years and watch us kill each other in wars and other conflicts. And they were now concerned, as was the Council of Wise Ones, that we would be able to make the step up the spiritual ladder before we ended up crashing and burning like Atlantis and Lemuria. So Albert said, in addition to our ET friends, we get a lot of help from the good souls on the spirit side. He said that the Council of Wise Ones has been encouraging very advanced, wise souls, masters, to live among us, to help us raise our vibrations by spreading the message from the spirit side, the message of love and hope. And they've also been picking up the pace of the messages they send through channels throughout the world. People who write books and blogs, people who host radio and TV shows, and people who speak at gatherings. And their intention was to keep on spreading the message of love and hope, with the hopes that eventually more and more humans would sign on to their message and help themselves and everyone else around them move up the evolutionary ladder. So as a result of all this help, humans are much more spiritually aware now than they were 20 or 30 years ago. But Albert made it clear that we can't depend on our friends to do everything for us. We have to do it for ourselves. And he said the first thing we have to do is we need to learn to think before we speak and act, in order to avoid hurting others around us, even if it's not intentional. So then Albert took me to the Akashic Records on the spirit side. And the Akashic Records contain the records of every life that has ever been lived in the universe. And he took me there and he allowed me to view a few segments from my current life, which is a preview to my life review. And life reviews are something that every one of us will have when we die and cross over. So life reviews are amazing because you can see all aspects of your life, and it helps you understand how your words and actions on the planet affected others around you. And we can watch our lives as though we're watching a 3D movie. We can actually jump in our bodies again and relive parts of our lives. And the real special thing about a life review is that we get to hear the thoughts and feel the emotions of the people we interacted with. And it's really an amazing learning tool. So he showed me two segments of my life in which was intended to show me how easy it is to hurt other people just by being careless about what we say and do. So the first segment was from my childhood, when I was in the 7th grade. And I watched as I raced out into the schoolyard at recess to play a game of pickup soccer. And as all the boys raced toward the field, I noticed my chubby friend Adam was lagging behind. So I turned around and said, "Hurry up, fatso, we don't have all day." Well, as I'm watching the replay, I was just devastated by the hurt that I caused my friend. When I tapped into his feelings and felt his emotions, he was just horrified that I could have embarrassed him in front of all the other kids. He felt anger, he felt shame, and he really wanted to drop into a gopher hole and disappear forever. So this was quite a lesson to me. I hadn't intended to cause him any harm. I'd said those words in jest, but it was just amazing at how badly he took it. And I really wished I could have gone back to do it again, but I couldn't. So the next segment, he showed me, demonstrated to me that animals have feelings and emotions too, and we should be mindful of this when we deal with them. That's an actual picture of my little dog, Oscar. It was a scene from the days when I was practicing law. And I came home from work one day, and I totally ignored my little dog, Oscar, who had been waiting for me to return all day. And all he wanted was a friendly greeting and a pat on his head to show him that I still loved him. But when I walked past him, lost in thought, he was crushed by my indifference. And I felt awful when I felt his feelings, his rejection. And he couldn't understand why I had passed by him. He didn't know what he had done to offend me. Of course, he had done nothing, but he didn't know that. So the poor little guy slunk back to his bed, rested his head on his crossed palms, and if dogs could cry, there would have been tears rolling down his cheeks. So it was an amazing lesson. And after watching that, I realized that animals have feelings and emotions, and they have souls that are part of the source just like humans. And as Albert says, if you have any doubt about that point, just look into the eyes of your little dog or cat for confirmation. So then to cheer me up, he showed me one segment where I did some good. And it was a scene from my days of practicing law. And I watched as a young lawyer came into my office to tell me in trembling words that he had forgotten to file a document with the stock exchange that was necessary in connection with a corporate merger we were working on. Well, luckily I remembered that I had made many mistakes myself over my career, and so I told him not to worry, that we would call the exchange together in the morning and we would straighten it out. And as I watched the replay, I recalled the incident, but I didn't realize the effect my words had on this young man. And when I tapped into his thoughts and feelings, I realized I'd given him a tremendous sense of relief because he had been worried sick that he might lose his job over his mistake. So I just hoped that this young man would remember that incident later in his life should the occasion ever arise when he was in a similar situation with another lawyer. Albert just said that shows you how seemingly minor acts of compassion can have a huge positive effect on another person, and that we should all strive to do kind acts whenever we can to everyone around us, and if we can do this, our planet will be a much better place to live in. So the overall lesson I took from this, we should really think before we act and speak to avoid causing harm to others, even if we don't intend it, and we should always strive to be kind whenever we can. So as we left the Hall of Records, I acknowledged that what I had witnessed was a great lesson for me and for all humanity. But I wondered if we couldn't, or what else we could do to help ourselves. Albert said we need to listen to our guides and our higher selves, because our guides are always sending us messages to guide us on the right path. But these messages are very subtle. They're like flashes of intuition, whispers in our minds, coincidental events, gut feelings, and we often don't hear them because our minds are cluttered with too many other thoughts. He said it's important for us to quiet our minds through meditation so we can hear guidance from Spirit. And if we can do this, we will manage to get rid of a lot of stress in our lives, we will learn to live in the present moment, and it'll help us to increase our vibratory rates. And Albert said, it's not easy for us to do that, but we really must resolve personally, each one of us, to do our best to and pursue this goal with firm determination. So then I wondered to Albert, I asked him, should we not just rely on the law of attraction to help us achieve our goals? Albert reminded me that thoughts are waves of energy that fan out and affect other energy and matter in the universe. So when you're walking down the street and you think you're having a conversation with yourself, you're really having a conversation with the universe, because your thoughts just escape and they affect other people, they affect other things. And Albert tells us that focused thoughts are much more powerful than scattered thoughts, just like a laser beam is more powerful than a beam from a flashlight. He said you can use the law of attraction to help you get you where you want to go. But he said you have to realize that not all of your desires are manifested, because sometimes they conflict with the desires of your higher self. So if your soul doesn't want you to achieve certain of your desires, it will be working behind the scenes to make sure these thoughts are not manifested. That's why the law of attraction doesn't always work. But Albert said, in any event, positive thoughts are always preferable to negative thoughts, even if you don't always see the results of your desires manifested. So then I wondered, should we just pray to God for miracles? Albert reminded me that the source does not manipulate events on earth, and miracles are not caused by the source. He said miracles on earth result from focused thoughts that tap into the energy of the universe. So the miracles attributed to Jesus in the Bible, like walking on water and turning water into wine, resulted because Jesus was able to focus his thoughts into powerful beams of energy. And Albert said, someday when humans learn to use more of their brain capacity, all of us will be able to perform miracles just like Jesus. But in the meantime, we're going to have to reach our goals through hard work and determination. So the talk about Jesus roused my curiosity, and I asked Albert if Jesus was for real, or was he just an invention of the Christian church? Well, Albert said, Jesus did indeed walk the earth centuries ago. He said Jesus was a master, a very advanced soul, who incarnated on earth to help humans take the next step up the spiritual ladder. And then to prove his point, he took me back to the Akashic records, and he let me glimpse a small segment from the life of Jesus. It was the day of his marriage celebration to Mary Magdalene. And even though the scriptures make no reference of this marriage, Albert said it did indeed happen because the Akashic records do not lie. So Jesus and Mary Magdalene had children of their own who were hidden at the time of his crucifixion and later smuggled away to another country where they grew up, had children of their own, and lived in relative obscurity. And the reason that there's no mention of this in the scriptures is because the early leaders of the church deleted all such references so that the Gospels would conform to their vision of the church. They felt that Jesus would be a better role model if he was reported to be celibate all of his life, because they felt that someone who was sullied by sexual intercourse could not be truly holy and godlike. And not only did Jesus have children, his mother Mary had children after Jesus in the normal fashion with her husband Joseph. So the celibacy of Jesus and the perpetual virginity of his mother were just fabrications created by the church. I was truly fascinated by watching the segments of the life of Jesus, and I could have stayed there much longer. But Albert led me away and said, we have other business to attend to. So as we were about to leave the spirit side, I asked Albert for a favor. He had told me that, of course, that we all prepare a life plan before we're born, and I was curious about this process. So I asked Albert if I could see one of these sessions. So he agreed, and I got to see the life planning session from a soul named Elizabeth. It was done in a room with a couple of dozen souls seated around a U-shaped table with a large viewing screen at one end of the wall. Albert explained that Elizabeth was planning her life, and it was a cooperative effort involving all the souls who would play a major role in her new upcoming life. All the souls in the room had to agree to be part of Elizabeth's life, and she had to agree to be part of theirs. Elizabeth explained to the group that she had lived her last 3 lives as a male, so this time she wanted to incarnate as a female. And because she had enjoyed wealth and prosperity in her most recent lives, this time she wanted to choose a life of poverty. So after a lively round-the-table discussion, Elizabeth's life plan was mapped out on the viewing screen and approved by all the souls. So then I asked Albert, how is it possible that the souls of her parents, who were already on earth, could be part of this session? And he said that every night when humans sleep, their souls leave their bodies temporarily and journey to the spirit side. And that was how her parents were at this session. It was during one of their nightly sojourns. Albert said that All life plans, including Elizabeth's, were designed to provide us with experiences and lessons we needed for our evolution. But Elizabeth knew that when she was born on Earth, she would have free will to act, and she wouldn't remember her planning, and so she would often stray off course. But she was comforted in knowing that no matter how many mistakes she made, how many wrong turns she took, she would always end up back on the spirit side. Because no matter what we do on Earth, everyone always returns to the spirit side. And Albert said, this means that even murderers and terrorists go back to heaven. I was like, wow. I said, and why do the bad guys go to heaven, Albert? He said they go to heaven just like the good guys because there's nowhere else to go. He said that, people who commit crimes on this planet do so either because they plan for it in their pre-birth planning or because they let their emotions get out of control, their negative emotions. He said that to the souls on the spirit side, life on Earth is like a play. If you're acting in a play on Earth and the script calls for you to stab and kill another actor, you don't get arrested by the police for murder because it didn't really happen. It was all just play acting. And likewise, souls on the spirit side recognize that the events on our planet are much like a play, where everyone is following a script. And the victim of a crime on Earth does not feel any hatred or animosity for the perpetrator when they both return to the spirit side. Everything that happens to us during our lives, whether good or bad, is meant to teach us a lesson and gets us closer to the day when we can graduate from this earth, this school called Earth. So then an important question arose in my mind. I asked Albert, how many chances do we have to learn our lessons on the earth plane? Albert says we can come back here as many times as we like, because linear time with a past, a present, and a future does not exist. It's just an illusion on the earth plane. In reality, there's no past and there's no future. They're just the present. He said that when you're born, all the possibilities for your life already exist. And I had trouble comprehending this concept, so he gave me an analogy. He said, imagine you're standing in front of a forest that has one path leading into it. And thereafter, the path branches out into many different routes and roads with many different twists and turns. So it's much like a labyrinth, except there are no dead ends. All the paths lead to a beautiful meadow on the other side of the forest. And what you see as you travel through the forest depends on which road you take and which path you follow. Similarly, when you are born, all the possible scenarios for your life already exist. But what you encounter in your life depends on the choices you make every time you come to a fork in the road. But no matter which road you take, you cannot become lost. You can never go wrong. You will always end up back on the spirit side. Now, I struggle a bit with this idea of no linear time because it's something that affects all of us every day on a very major basis. But Albert told me not to worry. He said if I didn't understand it now, it was because I was dealing with the limitations of my puny human brain. Thank you, Albert, for pointing out my intellectual shortcomings so eloquently. It was comforting to know that we didn't have any deadlines in terms of our evolution as souls. But I knew that my time on this planet was finite. And so I asked Albert if he could help me find my life's purpose before I ran out of time. And Albert said, I didn't just have one life purpose starting at the beginning of my life, from the time I was born. He said I had many life purposes at each stage of my life. So when I was born, my life purpose then was to learn how to speak and talk and become potty trained, so I could become a fully functioning child. And then when I started school, my life purpose was to finish my formal education and learn how to become a fully functioning human. And then when I finished law school, my life purpose was to get married, have children, and further my legal career. And now that when I retired from law, my life purpose then was to converse with Albert and write about his revelations. But how do people find out their life purpose at each stage? Well, Albert said that's a very difficult question. He said it wasn't intended to be easy. He said you have to be very careful to recognize the things that are going on around you, external happenings, like coincidental events and the words and actions of other people. And you have to listen to the feelings of your heart. And from all these, you need to get clues to find out where you should be heading. So he gave me an example. He said, if you happen to be unhappy and unfulfilled in your job, and you notice a billboard on your way to work that extols the virtues of a new company you've never heard of before, and then later that day, by sheer coincidence, you see a full-page ad in a newspaper to a similar effect, this just may be a message for you that you should be seeking employment with this new company. The bottom line, Albert says, is that if it feels right in your heart, it is your soul telling you to go for it. And if it feels like you're banging your head against a brick wall, you need to back up and find another route. So then, I'm running short of time here. Before I wrap up, I want to tell you about the most exhilarating trip I had with Albert. Ever since Albert had explained to me the nature of the source, I was very curious. So I asked Albert if he could take me to meet the source. Well, Albert said the source didn't exist in just one locality. The source was everywhere. It was the totality of everything in the universe. But he did agree to take me to a focal point of the source, a place he called the central sun, which exists near the center of our galaxy. So as we approached the central sun and dropped down into its core, I didn't feel any heat and I wasn't blinded by the light. Instead, I felt like I was immersed in a pool of pure, unconditional love that was exhilarating beyond words. The best analogy I can give you is for you to recall the most intense emotional high you've ever had in your life, like the day you got married or the birth of a child, and then multiply it by a few thousand times. I felt like I was in the center of all love in the universe, and I could have lingered there forever. But Albert soon pulled me away and said, "Come on, you have to go back home and write your book." Too bad. So that, my friends, are a few highlights from my astral trips with my spirit guide Albert. Time does not permit me to get into any more details, but they're all described in my second book, Dancing Forever with Spirit. Every trip I took with Albert was designed to teach me and all humanity a lesson or provide a nugget of wisdom. Albert wanted to encourage us to discard our negative emotions and fully embrace love and compassion for our planet, for one another, and for all of the other creatures we share our planet with. And if we can do this, we will expand our consciousness and increase our vibrations, and eventually, with a lot of work, we can ascend to the new Earth. So after my first set of astral trips with Albert, he came back again and took me on another set. And these are described in my third book, Dance of Heavenly Bliss, which is being published by Ozark Mountain Publishing, and it should be released sometime in early 2016. I will post updates on the publishing timetable on my website, garnetschulhauser.com. Now, I don't know if we have time for questions. Where's Julia? Okay, so I can take a few questions now from you, and Travis tells me that the questioner should stand on the X over there so you're in the video.
Hi Garnet, my name is Luke, I'm from Edmonton, just north from where, I don't know if you still live in Calgary.
You're from Edmonton? Oh,
yes.
Welcome.
So thank you. I was wondering, did you have, prior to your first encounter with Albert, did you have any psychic experience or spiritual experiences in your life that would have sort of prepared you for that, or did you have any talents, anything that?
No, I had no previous experiences with of any sort of nature like that. I was just very much of a straight-laced, button-down lawyer, and so no, I had nothing to prepare me for it. And it suddenly came out of the blue, and I had to struggle with it a bit at first. But then, as I got to talking Albert, I knew he was the real thing. I mean, he was really a spirit guide, and I very much enjoyed it. So it was really very much of a transformation for me. Anybody else?
Hi, Albert.
Hi.
I'm curious, talking about the council of the wise people, wise spirits, and the planning that they're doing for someone's life, and that all the spirits there are planning to support, be a part of this life. But yet, when someone commits these violent crimes against another human, was that foreseen at this meeting? And is that okay at this meeting? No, it's going to happen. It's part of their journey. Or how does this come about when they're planning this and then someone goes and is an awful person?
Albert says that some of the evil deeds on earth are planned and others aren't planned, and they're because people who are on the planet lose control of their negative emotions. So the ones, believe it or not, some bad deeds are in fact planned, and it may seem strange to us, but someone may feel like that as part of the lessons they need to learn on earth, they want to feel like what it's like to be a victim of a crime. And that may seem strange to us, but that does happen, in which case then they go to another soul and say, I need somebody to be the bad guy in my upcoming life. Will you do it? And so you can always find another soul to do it. And so in those cases it was planned, and it was at the request of the person on the receiving end. And they had reasons of their own as part of their soul development to experience this. And I know it's difficult for us to understand this, but on the spirit side, it makes perfect sense.
I was just curious. I see you still have on a wedding ring.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I see you still have on a wedding ring. I was just curious, when something like this happens, and we awaken and start thinking and acting differently, friends and family can give you a hard time. Did your wife and family have a hard time going through this transformation with you? Or?
No, actually not. And I didn't tell my wife that I had met Albert for a while just because I was concerned about what she'd say. I feared that she'd have the guys come in the white coats and the straitjacket and haul me away. But no, she was very good, and she was very understanding. And I kind of let it out in small pieces to her. First of all, telling her I'd met a homeless man. I was writing a book about it, and I said, and this homeless man was really my spirit guide. So we sort of went into it. She's very understanding. She's actually quite spiritual herself, and she had 2 spiritual experiences herself. One just after her father died, and one just after her mother died, when they actually came to her shortly after. And so she's very much signed on to that concept that spirits live forever and they go to the other side. And so yeah, it was very good. And and both of my sons were really quite good. They didn't think I was crazy, or at least they didn't tell me so anyway. And they're very supportive about my writing efforts. And so, and then even my sisters, I have 3 sisters who are still very staunch Roman Catholics. And I was afraid about what they would say because wasn't kind to the Catholic Church. But they were very supportive, and they said, go for it and keep on writing. So I'm very pleased with that.
Okay, that's a big deal, because a lot of family and friends can just completely write you off when you start talking.
Yeah, and that does happen, yeah. I was very fortunate.
Hi, Garnet. You'd mentioned that in your astral travel that you saw the place that was heaven, or were introduced to what is heaven. I wondered if Albert had mentioned that there's any aspect of heaven that we would maybe construe as hell, where maybe our darker aspects are removed from our experience here before we're allowed to.
He told me categorically that hell does not exist. He says there is no bad place on the spirit side. It's all full of unconditional love. Everyone loves each other. There's no negative emotions. Nothing bad happens. It's all just a wonderful place to be. So he said, there is no hell. That's just a creation of various religions, a means to scare people, through guilt and fear to behave and so on. He said, no, hell doesn't exist. There's no devil. There are no evil spirits per se. Everyone is really, on the spirit side, everyone's just a great soul.
So there's nothing that needs to be removed once we leave here?
No.
Great, thanks.
So I think that I'm out of time here. So thank you everyone for being here today. I'll be in the next room signing my books. Thank you.